Welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In this segment, Pat and James discuss the mindset shift that we believe all people who live a creative life must go through. It is a hinge moment where we either go do something else or push through because we refuse to beat ourselves up for not winning the lottery. And along the way in our conversation, we commit to a new experiment: how to build personal capacity to do and achieve more. Hey, Pat.
Yes, James.
Well, you sent me a very, very good story titled On Money and Creative Work. Subhead: musician Caleb Cordes, I'm not sure how to pronounce, who I think also goes by Sinai Vessel, discusses coming to terms with not making a living from your artistic output. And there's a line further down where he is asked, success and failure are very loaded and ambiguous concepts, especially when you're talking about the arc of a career or something. I'm curious about how you either define or navigate the notion of success and whether it's achievable or something else. And, he gives a little bit more of an answer, but the line that really caught my eye was, as a friend told me recently, you can't beat yourself up for not winning the lottery. Right? So I want to say that again. You can't beat yourself up for not winning the lottery. Now, this is somebody, I think he's about 30 years old. He's a musician. He's put out a few albums. He's had some success, but hasn't, from the vibe of the interview, hasn't had a big breakthrough. Right? And it feels to me like it's a really wonderful interview that shows somebody in the process of a very important creative mindset shift. And the way that I think of it is, when I started as a writer, I had this idea that because I've been doing a lot of writing already, and because people liked what I was writing, and I got a lot of positive feedback, that when I started sending my writing out, there would be that positive feedback coming back. But of course, there was a lot of silence, right? And so, very quickly reached a point after getting, rejection letters and no responses, and, people ghosting me, and, all that kind of stuff that happens, where I had to go through a mindset shift, which is, hey, this isn't me winning the lottery. This is going to be something that I gotta, I'm a stubborn person. I want to do this. I'm going to dig my heels in, and I'm going to keep pushing ahead. And I accepted, I think, that mindset shift felt like maybe it's a very common thing amongst creatives, where you have your beginning expectation that doesn't get met because, it doesn't for like 99% of us. And you go through this moment, or maybe it's more extended than a moment, where you recognize, I'm going to have to work at this. And there is nothing assured, but this is what I want. And so I keep going. And I think there's a lot of people that quit too. And I'm just curious about your thoughts.
Well, this is a great topic. I like how you frame it as a mind shift or a mindset shift, because I can't imagine it not happening, to people who are creatives in any of the arts. I think it's easy to assume that the outliers that you see, there's little success stories where somebody's discovered in a soda shop and then they have this long career as an actress or an actor, um, it's easy to look at those as, oh, that's how it goes. That's actually how it goes. And then when you start learning how to do any kind of craft or art, you realize, okay, to get to the point where this is effortless, it's going to take a lot of work. And if you are holding up this eventual success as a guaranteed finish line for the amount of work it's going to take, you're kind of deluding yourself. because that finish line isn't guaranteed. The lottery win isn't guaranteed. Might not know the right people. You might not submit it to the right places at the right times. So there's a lot of sort of, you know, un a lot of variables that can
Mhm.
affect whether you actually make money out of your art, whether you get known for your art, and I like the idea of that moment of recognition that extends then for the rest of your career, usually being, not the situation that prompted that recognition, but the new kind of understanding of reality, that moment as a mind shift, because that's really all it is, and yet mind shifts are everything,
Mhm.
when you get to the point where you realize something new about the situation you're in, rather than something new about what you're doing in the situation you're in, it's more global, gives you a much bigger
Mhm.
perspective on the whole thing. And then you can decide, okay, like our friend Doug Harrison,
Mhm.
I'm going to separate the art and the money because trying to make them coincide is very, he didn't use the word
Mhm.
frustrating, but I felt that it was probably in there somewhere. You've been doing it for something for 15 years. And you're not making money out of it. Every album you put out is costing you money. Yeah, if you want to keep doing the work, the art, which is what Doug does, and I don't know about Caleb, but the reality is you have to separate those 2 things and do it because you enjoy it or because it's part of your physical operating system or whatever your
Mhm.
reason is.
Mhm.
Um, so I like how you're thinking about it. Also like the idea that, um, just to go back to, there being no finish line that's gonna have you getting, say, the Booker Prize, when you break through the tape,
Right.
with your writerly pecs. I think the part that changes for people, the more that they commit and to doing the stuff that they really wanna do with their creative work, um, the more likely it is that it'll end up somewhere really good that they couldn't have seen from the beginning. And
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
my personal experience is that I think over time, you become a lot more attuned to things that could make you, give you a new audience, or, you become a lot more attuned to how you can capitalize on things that go well and how
Mhm.
you can basically recover from things that don't go well, or projects that tank or whatever. And so that leads you to just become more successful over time, regardless of whether that success could be looked at as overnight.
Mhm.
For most creative people, I don't think it is looked at as overnight success. Even actors who debut super young, um, like Ralph Macchio, the Karate Kid or whatever.
Mhm.
He was playing, I think, a 16-year-old. I think he was actually about 30 when he played that role.
Wow.
He was way older. There's a lot of actors who, uh, if you look at their actual photos from when they were the age, 16, say, if they were playing like the guy in The Maze Runner,
Mhm.
one of the bit actors or one of the supporting roles in The Maze Runner, his his shot of him, the age that he was supposed to be portraying in The Maze Runner looked like a tiny little kid, because he
Mhm.
just was a slow developer physically, I guess. And then, but he played it when he was much older, and he looked like the age he was supposed to be portraying. So,
Mhm.
why am I going down this rabbit hole? I don't know. It's only just to say that we don't. Uh, I agree that there's so much about any industry, especially for musicians. I think it's even more so that there's this element of winning the lottery for success, because
Uh-huh.
there's so many variables, and it is so far up to chance, and even to where you live and who you know. But it's also, it's a bit more complicated than that, because what you might end up doing is you're not winning a lottery, you're actually creating income,
Mhm.
um, for yourself, so it's a bit different.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to
Well,
confuse you.
there's no training program for here's how you make money as a creative person, right? And
No.
so there's no sort of this is how you monetize something. And other than, well, I'm going to sell a lot of stories, I'm going to sell a lot of records, I'm going to get cast in a lot of movies and shows and
Mhm.
that kind of thing. but there's nothing that says, hey, that works for a very small number of people. You've got to be very creative about how you're going to manage to make money off your creative so that you can continue to be a creative, right?
Yeah.
And there's also something that was, interesting to me that you said it, about reaching a point where it feels effortless.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that ever happens if you choose to go down any creative line of work in the same way that it does in other lines of work, right?
Yeah.
So, I was talking to somebody who became, a CTO or CIO of two very big organizations, and they were describing how at first everything felt big and hard, and can I do this?
Mhm.
And then, by the end of their career, it had that effortlessness to it. Everything was firing on all cylinders. They knew whatever challenges and things that would blow up they could deal with.
Mm.
They'd gotten there. And then I think there's also the example of somebody who does something like carpentry or plumbing,
Yeah.
where you start out trying to figure it out and trying to learn the trade and then learn, am I going to work for somebody else and move my way up that ladder, or am I going to go out and freelance, be my own thing? But you get to this point where somebody says, I want you to design, these cabinets or build a house for me or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you're not thinking, oh gosh, how do I do that?
Right.
It's this sort of effortlessness, and you have these connections. You know who your lumber supplier is going to be. You know the subcontractors you're going to bring in. You just have your shit together, right?
Yeah.
And so I wonder if we're so used to looking at a career as that, where of course you're going to start off and have this huge learning curve, which we absolutely have. And I think that's this mindset shift is,
Yeah.
that steep learning curve is getting to the point where it's like, oh, I'm not going to win the lottery. I got to really work.
Yeah.
But we're also used to, if you put in the time and put in the hours, things materialize,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
a career is built.
Yeah.
Whereas that's not how this seems to work all the time. It really is a lot of work. You got to grit it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Grit it out. I think so. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to where this interview that we're talking about with
Mm,
Caleb Cords or Cordes appeared, which is this publication called The Creative Independent. It's a newsletter you can sign up for, thecreativeindependent.com, and we'll link to it. But it's got so many interesting categories of interviews and other stuff that gives you food for thought, things you can give or take to each other if you have creative colleagues. And
mm.
one
Yeah.
of them, yeah, looking at this mindset shift uh, of realizing that where you um, where you start to question whether you should be doing this art, basically, I think is what circles around it. It can have this element of, should I even be doing this? There's this doubt
Hmm.
because, it's like, should I keep buying lottery tickets because my wallet's full of them and I could use that 20 bucks a week for something else? But
Hmm.
um, it's a little different because, you've been busting your hump for um, 10, 15 years on learning how to do your stuff. And so it's getting to the point where you're technically super proficient and it's verging on effortless to do the creative part, or at least you understand yourself well enough to be able to set
Hmm.
the conditions where you can do your stuff effectively in shorter periods of time and with more skill, and you produce better stuff. But then there's this part coming in like a plane flying in that you just spotted going, "Oh, guess what? Unless something really big happens, you are not gonna make a living doing this."
Hmm.
How do you deal with that information, And do you think people quit at that point, or do you think people do what, other people we've talked to have done and what we've both done, which is go, "Okay. It's tougher than I thought it was, but I'm not gonna stop doing it because of that.
Yeah, I think everybody's, unique in what their stress tolerance is, right?
Yeah.
And also their personal situation. There's another line in here, admitting defeat is underrated, right?
I love that too.
And, I think for some people it's not worth it, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
recognize, oh shit, this is harder. The act of whatever creative that, I'm a good actor, I'm a good writer, I'm a good musician, what have you, is they're confident in that, but the just being in the business of it and,
Yeah.
making the living of it is harder than they anticipated. It's not worth it, and they think about, well, I've got family, I've got kids, I've got responsibility, blah, 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 blah. And so they stop. And then there's people like me who don't think ahead and say, fuck you all, I'm going to keep doing it. And just have a certain stubbornness, and because it's what we want to do,
Yeah.
right? And so, we're not going to let somebody stop us. I think the other thing though too is, um, that stubbornness helps us find the side door, the back door, the alternate route. It helps give us the creativity to find other ways to make a living
Mhm.
based on this creative skill that we've developed, right? And so, ghostwriting, editing is one way to do it. I'm sure acting has its way. I'm sure musicians have their way.
Yeah.
And you just figure this stuff out, right?
Yeah. I think one of the most time honored, I don't say it's an honorable profession, but one of the ways that's across the board is teaching the craft to other people. Because by the
Mhm.
time you realize you're not going to make a living doing it, or accept maybe that there's not going to be a lottery win, um, you have the skills to teach novices, intermediates sometimes as well. So I think that's probably one of the things people do.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, maybe maybe we're identifying something of a need that, maybe there's a consultancy opportunity out there to just say, hey, creatives, you haven't won the lottery, you're not getting the calls you thought you would get, but you still have really impressive skills. Let's figure out how to put them to work. I
Interesting.
imagine somebody's doing this. It feels like, these things get thought of well before I come along, um, but it feels like that's out there, and it feels like, yeah, there's plenty of people who say, no, this isn't worth it.
Yeah.
I want to do other, I want to have the financial capacity to do a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And then there's other people who, for love or stubbornness or some combination, we push ahead and think creatively and have more of a, and here's a real cliche, but more of a growth mindset that,
Mm,
so this avenue isn't working out yet, but there are other opportunities, and so I can shift into those other opportunities.
yeah. I like that. Yeah, that makes sense to me. You know what popped into my head was circling back to what you said about the business side, sort of a lack of interest in grappling with the business side. And that can start early. If you are just focused on the art of what you're doing, and you don't deal with submitting your stuff, trying to get gigs, doing all that stuff, or you deal with it, but you just are happy with how it's progressing, or you feel like there's
Mhm.
going to be something better around the corner. And so you keep going on that path. There is a point where you have to get deadly serious about the business side, I think, and really, I don't know where that I think like you say, everybody's unique, and I don't know where that point happens for people. I'm just thinking of my friend Tina. She was getting her roof caved in, and so had to stay somewhere else while the insurance company arranged for it to get fixed and all that stuff. And so she ended up in this Airbnb, uh, and she was like, I should be for a long term for like 3 months or something.
Mhm.
And she was like, I should be a a person who supplies, who consults Airbnb owners, and I'll go stay for a night and I'll list all the shit that's wrong with their place that stopped me from enjoying it, that's going to lead to bad reviews. And I was
Mhm.
like, you should do that. That's a great little niche, And she was retiring, so she had the time and stuff. And then I said, "You'll need a website." And she was like, "Oh, forget it." I mean, sometimes I think that the lack of interest in engaging with the business side happens earlier for some people than for others.
I want to act. Well, you're gonna have to get up in front of an audience. Oh, fuck that. Or you're gonna have to memorize lines. Oh, God.
Yeah. And,
Ugh.
let me correct myself. It's not a lack of I mean, for Tina, it was a lack of interest in engaging with the business side. But I would say, for the guy in this interview we're talking about, I don't think it was a lack of interest at all. He was really doing it, and he
Mhm.
wasn't getting the results that he needed to feel like it was working. And so,
Yeah,
and he wrote a whole album, around the money, right?
yeah,
How that works for him. It's like anybody, you take part of your personal experience and use it to create your stuff.
yeah.
And I just found that so interesting that there are so few songs about money. Um,
Right.
and there's so little art about how like what it takes to be an artist, and there's almost no writing really that I can think of about how the hustle for getting published operates.
Mhm.
There's
Yeah,
lots of
you could do a whole
advice.
concept album.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
somebody who has a love for something that they can't ever really achieve, but they
yeah,
keep going anyway because they're in it for the long haul.
yeah.
And there was another point in this article too, where he talks about grass is greener conversations that he has with friends.
Mm,
And they look at his life where he's a musician and he's gigging, and writing music and recording it and putting out albums and living a certain type of lifestyle
yeah,
that maybe they thought would be cool and sort of started, but ended up not doing and going more for a corporate, vocational career, what have you.
right.
And they had this jealousy of, oh man, I should have stuck it out because I'm really bored with what I'm doing and I see what you're doing and it's so much more interesting and exciting. And he has this, flip side, which is, oh man, you have this security, you have this predictability, you have this stability, kind of thing.
Mhm,
And yeah, I mean, I think it's, the same thing. Those people maybe hit that same mindset shift moments where they're like, oh, this is gonna be harder than I thought. I'm gonna go do something else.
yeah,
And now they're feeling some regrets that they didn't
yeah,
really try.
yeah. I like how he phrases it, they have some sort of primary vocation that they've dedicated most of their energy to that now sustains them, and he so they feel bad, because it isn't their art, and he has precisely the inverse desire or the inverse regret that I've not set myself up to be able to have something that sustains me outside of music. So there's a little bit, mutual envy, and I love what he's saying is that I wish that I had more examples or more people telling me sobering truths in my life, that these two things aren't opposed, that you can work
Mm.
on a vocation and develop a career, and also lead a very fulfilling artistic life simultaneously. One doesn't have to be sacrificed for the other. And now I think that I'm trying to set that balance for myself. So I'm quoting from Caleb Cordes and this interview on the Creative Independent. And what I feel like is that's kind of the lottery ticket right there. If
Mhm.
you can, set the balance where you are making money so that okay, the lottery ticket is actually Picasso or whoever, right? That's the
Right.
lottery ticket, Stephen King, like somebody who's just making
Mhm.
a killing on their writing. And we don't have to know how they got there. That's just the idea.
Yeah, and got there with relative ease, right?
Well, I don't know. If we really dug deep into all of their lives, I don't know that we would see much relative ease.
Well, I mean, in that we've all worked really, really hard, right? And so Stephen King is a great example because he worked really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
And then he sends out Carrie and it blows up for him
Mm,
and
yeah.
becomes, the
He
big,
sent it out a bunch of times, it got
yeah,
no's, 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 he threw it in the garbage, his wife took it out of the garbage and sent it out,
right.
and the right
Yeah.
person read it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a story there for
Yeah.
sure.
So I think we are gonna have to agree to differ on the relative ease part.
Okay.
But I think the real lottery ticket, bar the outliers, that that are clearly super famous and we may think they got there easily. The real lottery ticket is actually understanding yourself well enough to know that, you know, if you're not relying on your artistic life to blow up and be a huge success, you can create your own situation where your vocation, whatever it
Mhm.
is, and mine is definitely creative adjacent, yours is creative because you're writing. Um, your vocation can support you in a way that feeds your art rather than draining you so much that at the end of the day you're riding the couch. And
Mhm.
I sometimes really I regret sometimes being basically self-employed, in a creative adjacent industry. Oh, well, it's a creative industry. Because I can't just take 7 weeks paid vacation and travel.
Right.
My sister works in a bakery. She's been a baker for decades, and she gets 7 weeks paid vacation, and
Wow. Wow.
she has the potential to travel for, like, a month in a year and still have 3 weeks at home over, Christmas or whatever floats her boat
Yeah.
kinda thing. I'll never have that, as far as I know, because and I'm not saying I'll absolutely never have it, because who knows? Maybe I'll sell a book, but the idea is that, I'm not counting on that. I haven't built that ability into my life, and I love travel so much that I'm kind of some days I'm like, man, would I love to get out of town. And
Mm.
it's not that I don't have the money sometimes, because sometimes I do. It's that I don't have the time because I'm running a
Yeah.
business. So it's
Yeah.
just one of those conversations you can have with yourself every couple of years
Mm.
or more often. But I would never go back on my decision, which
Yeah.
was really the mindset shift of, "So what?" "So what if I'm not making money out of this to the degree that I need to survive on it? I'm still gonna do it, and I'm still gonna make it come 1st or 2nd or 3rd in my life,
Yeah.
not 10th, not 0."
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And when I when I think of things, it's not that I'm not making enough money to do that. It's that it's other stuff, right? It's like, the other stuff gets in the way and clogs up the works. And speaking of siblings, I was at a doctor appointment yesterday
Uh-huh,
and I'm chatting, and the doc, he's somebody who I'd seen once before, and he was sort of subbing in for my regular doc, and he's looking at me, and he goes, "You look really familiar." And he goes, "Do you have a brother, Terry?" And I'm
uh-huh.
like, "Yeah." And it turns out he's worked with my brother.
Oh,
And he
no
goes,
way.
"Yeah, I worked with Terry for about a year. That guy was always on vacation, it felt like."
Ah. Yes.
And then he said a lot of really very complimentary things about him as a doctor, which was nice to hear. But yeah, it's true. There are, I guess you can, maybe being a doctor isn't the right example because that's a challenge in and of itself. But you know, yeah, if you're somebody who says I want to be able to go on lots of vacations and do a lot of traveling, then you're probably going to pick a vocation and a career that's more amenable to
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That has paid time off and that has a high enough salary if you can get there
Mhm.
that you can afford to travel, or you have to be very creative about how you work travel into your, paid work, your paid creative
Mhm.
adjacent work. So, for me, that's gonna probably look like residencies and maybe teaching gigs where you actually
Yeah.
go somewhere and
Yeah.
teach whatever you know a lot about. And that's goes back to the business side. That is really that's just business. That's not you creating. That's
Mhm.
you working out how to make the business work for the stuff you like to do without having spent 40 years in a job you don't like that at least has
Mhm.
lots of paid time off?
Yeah, well, and here we are in this, mid-level, mid-rung delusional ambitions scenario, right?
Yeah.
And we're running a grant experiment where it's a combination of seeking financial resources, but also time away to work.
Yeah.
And so, none of that is guaranteed, but boy, that door is wide open.
Yeah.
and it's up to us to walk through it or not. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think you're right. There is absolutely a niche for some kind of cult consultant, and you're probably right that they already exist, who says, "Okay, so you're a writer, your skills are good. This is how you make your living. Here's ways you can maximize
Hmm.
your business model so that you
Hmm.
are not relying on one gig after another to float
Hmm.
the financial boat for your household." I think
Yeah,
that would be somebody that would be worth spending a couple $100 for an hour of their time if they knew what the fuck they were talking about. Like, that's the
I
big
know. Yeah.
question, you know?
I know. And that's, I think if you're starting your career, and this is, maybe a little bit more of a sidetrack, but if you're starting your career, I think that is more valuable and it's easier to find somebody who's going to give you a fairly high level of value. Whereas
Mm.
for us at this point, who's going to do that? Who has the awareness and the wherewithal and the experience for us to
Ye
trust and say, yeah, that makes sense. I haven't thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and to come up with ideas that we haven't already come up with ourselves, and really for me, I have so many ideas. It's not a lack of ideas that stops me from following through on creating a stronger financial container for my life. It's that I don't know how to execute all my ideas simultaneously,
Hmm.
while doing my day job and writing novels. I just don't know how to do it.
Oh, yeah.
And they talk about teams, and a lot of people have teams, when they say, "Oh, yeah, here's my program,"
Wow.
the writing, crucible
All
or
right.
whatever the hell they call it, "And here's my team. My team will set you up, and I use this and I use that." I'm like, "Huh?"
Yeah, no. So, all right. So here's something I'm going to pitch. This is a little bit more long term.
Okay.
And we've got the grant experiment running, and
Oh,
we're
fuck, here we go.
kind of closing it out, though it feels like it's something we're going to continue past the close date, which
Oh,
I think
yeah, but it's got a few
August
months to run.
30th. Is that right?
We're
Uh,
at the 6-month mark. It's August 17th is when we started, I think.
okay. So we'll
Yeah.
call it August 30th. So
Okay.
maybe the next leap from there is uh something along the lines of, all right, how do you build out the capacity? Because I agree with you. I don't have a lack of ideas or ways to bring in more revenue. I have a lack of time, right? Because
Exactly.
I'm busy
Yeah.
doing what I do. And so maybe the next experiment should be about increasing capacity.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm all over that like a dirty shirt. I am gonna have trouble waiting till the grand experiment is over.
Yeah,
Okay, so the question for our next experiment is, how do you build out the capacity to bring in more revenue to support basically your creative work and your life?
right,
Okay.
right. And key to that too is without having a gigantic bank account where you hire tons of people at lots of money to go do stuff.
Yeah,
Right?
because, you have to invest it in yourself to a degree in order to achieve
Yeah.
anything, right? But, I mean, ask me how many writing courses I've taken, ask me how many craft books I've read, like, it's ridiculous,
Mhm.
but it's more than that. It's how do you level up, how do you build out your capacity?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah. It's
is
your
the question.
personal capacity.
Yeah, your personal capacity. Woo-hoo!
Yeah.
Woo!
All right, Caleb, if we're mispronouncing your last name and you happen to be listening to this, apologies.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
Caleb, you've sparked a lot of good thinking. And to whoever it is that's putting out the Creative Independent, we're gonna make sure that we put you we note who you are, where you are, and how to reach you because you've got lots of good stuff. And I'm seeing beneath the Caleb piece, you've got musician Eva Hendricks on the complicated business of how to be in a band. And then below that, visual artist Mark Horowitz on making a living and making a life. So, all good stuff. All good
Crazy
stuff.
useful. Crazy, crazy useful. And I'm just looking at Creative Independence about page, and it is a growing resource of emotional and practical guidance for creative people, published ad-free by Kickstarter, a public benefit corporation. We produce interviews, wisdom, and guides that illuminate the trials and tribulations of living a creative life as told by working artists, including writers, musicians, designers, visual artists, and others. Our goal is to feed and grow the community of people who create. These guys are like sisters in the GU Clubhouse.
Yeah.
Their what do you call that? Their wheelhouse is extremely close to what we were interested in, and so I'm gonna
and the name for the guy who did this interview is Tyler, and we're at Tyler, we're gonna mispronounce your name, apologies, but Tyler Bussey, Bussey. And he's got his own website and all kinds of stuff going on, so we'll make sure to put him in here. And so good stuff.
Very cool. All right.
Adios.
Until soon.
Thanks for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. We'd love to hear how we're doing, so please leave a comment, join our chat page, or send us an email at giftedunderachievers@substack.com. We're available on Spotify, iTunes, and anywhere else you like to get your podcasts. Also, we'd love to have you for a subscriber. It's free, and we promise not to hassle you with too many emails. Just one a week. Have an awesome day.